Talking about comic books every week is easy. I mean, you just read comic books and then you talk about what's in them. It's not exactly genius level calculus. However, thinking up something new to do for an intro every week is freaking annoying. Let me see. Let's see. What happened this week that I can talk about? Oh, no.
Hello?
Hey, man.
Yeah, what's up?
I need your hand for a second.
Alright, what you need?
I can't think of an idea what to do for the intro for this week's episode. What should I do?
Skip it and we'll go back to it.
Skip it and go back to it?
Just go back, just do your thing. We'll do it retroactively.
Oh, no, I guess I could do that. Or I could just film this conversation and make it the intro.
Oh, you fucking cunt.
All right, thanks, buddy. Bye.
Oh, fuck you.
He's so helpful. I've spoken on this show before about my weird affection for the empty zone. How it's a surprisingly complex and esoteric kind of horror. It really revels in playing with your sense of reality, constantly causing you to question what is real and what is not. However, the empty zone is beginning to revel a bit too much in its own strangeness. Every time it has a moment where it grasps a salient or lucid thought, it finds a need to pirouette and turn itself into Barnum and Bailey's crazy Gothic lesbian techno circus of the mind. Trademark. Part of the reason I love this book is its willingness to play with the surreal. Its willingness to sort of break down what the reader understands to be real and re-establish it from panel to panel. However, these reality-shattering moments are not as effective if you don't have a grounded sense of reality to base them off of. This book refuses to let any moment simply just be. It has to inject some level of strangeness into it. There's a scene where it's just a conversation between two characters. Rather than simply have that conversation anywhere, it decides to have the conversation take place inside another character's mind, a la the white space scenes from The Matrix. And it doesn't even do anything with that weird fact. It's like, we're in our mind now, just chilling. If you're gonna do some crazy doofy thing like having mind conversations, at least do something with it. Feels like a wasted opportunity. Like if you took a shitload of Molly and then just sat around your house watching Friends. Perhaps I'm criticizing this book for something that is not really a flaw. Yes, this book is not clear or salient or anything like that, but it never makes that part of its identity. It never claims to make sense. It commits to this weird steampunk Silent Hill feel and never lets go. It's a book that builds horror by constantly being disarming. The reader never feels safe. It's like the walls themselves are your enemy, or that reality itself is naturally antagonistic. I don't know if it's the smoky art aesthetic or the incredible page layouts or just the strange, endearing nature of all the characters, but this book has really connected with me. Both by being a great horror story and just by being an incredibly interesting piece of comic bookage. Comic bookage, not a word. I don't really care. Basic summary of the book's thesis, go! Every time the superhero the Mantle is killed, the persona and power are passed on to a seemingly random person. Awesome premise, right? You're just sitting around enjoying yourself and all of a sudden, boom! You catch superpowers like it's the Clap or something. The problem is a supervillain who calls himself the Plague constantly hunts down and kills every single new Mantle. So far, this series has followed the struggle of several different Mantles. The idea of just a random dude all of a sudden getting superpowers and then immediately being tasked with using them or dying is kind of a novel turn for what would otherwise be a tried idea. This new Mantle, Jen, is tearfully afraid of her oncoming fate at the hands of the Plague. And this entire issue is her trying to make peace with her own eventual death. The constant participation in what seems to be a never-ending cycle gives the book a real feeling of hopelessness. Like the world and its heroes are simply doomed to die, live again, and die. And this issue is really about the digestion of that. Accepting your own mortality as a normal human being is hard enough. To see it coming down the barrel of a gun as fast as it can right at your face is an entirely different process. And that's what Jen struggles with. And the book really lands some really heavy emotional beats as she decides how she wants to go out. On what terms does she want to exit her own life? While this book definitely defines itself by some lighter 90s aesthetic choices and has a very kind of kitschy soul, the ideas it tackles and places it goes are heavy, deep, and interesting. Welcome back. I don't really know how this song goes. So the science fiction pitch for this book is, because you know every comic book nowadays for some reason has to be based around some moderately interesting sci-fi concept, is since the beginning of time there's been a war between two factions whose soldiers constantly reincarnate the next generation every time they die. Now each warrior in the side of the conflict is paired up with another warrior, and their job throughout all of eternity is every lifetime to hunt down that one warrior, kill them, and then kill themselves. Much like I talked about earlier in The Mantle, this book really builds a sense of hopelessness by making you feel like you're participating in a never-ending, repeating cycle of doom. But there you go, kind of cool sci-fi concept, whatever, but that's not even really what this book is about. It's not the book's strength. The book's strength lies in the characterization of the main character. Mantle is a young girl that just can't quite seem to get a hold of life. She can't maintain a job or a relationship, or she struggles with some mild mental illness, and she constantly finds herself running from a highly publicized and awful part of her past. Where a lot of books would choose to sort of canonize the angst of its main character, Welcome Back shows it in a very true, grounded, and realistic light. There's nothing holy or divine about the fact that she's a struggling young woman. It sucks. She's really having a hard time with it. And she internalizes the fact that she can't seem to get a hold of her own life. And by doing that, the book really captures the feeling of not being able to keep your life under your own feet. And that's a part of Welcome Back that sort of makes it bigger and better than a lot of books that are trying to do the same thing. Yes, later on it introduces all this really kind of cool 70s kung fu style action. Yes, it does an incredible job of building this sort of a big complex mythos that stretches all the way back to the beginning of time, sort of giving the story this endless sandbox to play with. Yes, it does have sort of big high concept ideas of eternal love spanning multiple generations, but it's that soul, it's that really relatable sense of struggle that makes the book land. That makes it more than a popcorny adventure, that makes it really stick to the inside of its readers. It's also successful as a first issue because it gives you just a taste of its characters and just a taste of the larger scale of its world and leaves so many questions unanswered. If you're gonna pick up one first issue this week, make it Welcome Back. It is by far the most promising new series of the week. I really need to stop spending my weekends antagonizing gypsies, because I swear to fucking God, Infinity Loop is the byproduct of some sort of curse put on me. I've almost never connected with the first issue of a book like I connected with issue 1 of Infinite Loop. It was beautiful, it was sharply written, it was high in concept, and then all of a sudden, it just turned to ass, which would have been fine. Series fall apart all the time. The thing is, this book just keeps sneaking in hints that it is a greater piece of literature. It will have brilliant metaphoric ideas that it just ends up not taking anywhere. And issue 5, unfortunately, continues the book's tradition of just not making the most of its own potential. Listen, the biggest problem with Infinite Loop and where it all started to fall apart is rather than expounding on its own ideas, it chooses to parrot very basic, very bumper sticker level ideas of activism. It chooses to take the broadest and simplest takes on the big ideas that are affecting us as human beings and absolutely adding nothing to the conversation. Here, let me try to show you what I'm saying. Here's a list of things we know because we are human beings with souls and we have basic observational recall. Number 1, hate is bad. Number 2, society has a tendency to be a dick to people who are different. Number 3, labels are harmless until they aren't. Number 4, them white people done some straight naughty shit. Duh. Listen, it's not literature's job to reaffirm the fact that we have some very sad flaws in our world. It's literature's job to show how those flaws affect us on a human level. It's its job to bring something to the conversation, to be additive, to add new thoughts to our zeitgeist. At the end of this issue, Infinite Loop does bring up some interesting thoughts on martyrdom. As we come to the conclusion of the series, in the next issue, it does have potential to kind of stick the landing and make an actual very poignant and additive thought on what being a martyr is and how it is inherently manipulative, how what a martyr means to the person who is actually martyr might be different than how we actually read it, and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, the book has made so many missteps that I just don't have any faith that it's going to make the most on what it's set up. So Oakhill Strike is a book that kind of built itself around making fun of 90s comics, which to me is kind of lazy. Making fun of 90s comic books is like challenging a kid without arms and legs to a game of hopscotch. 90s comic books were garish in appearance, they were pandering in plot, and it was a decade where the industry operated with a very coked up cockiness that almost destroyed it. Oakhill Strike does a great job of working the ribs of all the things that were wrong with 90s comic books. And through its first 3 issues, it appeared to kind of simply just be that, a parody book. A book that is meant to punch at one of the most embarrassing chapters in the history of comic books. However, in this final issue, the book sort of transforms itself into something much deeper, which is unexpected because through its first 3 issues, this book was pretty much just about jamming as much comedy at you as it could. In fact, a lot of the time, this series just feels like it's trying too hard, you know, like that one friend you had that does nothing but quote Family Guy all the time and thinks that qualifies as his humor. As the series comes to a close, it comments on 90s comic books in a very different way than it has previously. It acknowledges that modern comic book creators and modern comic book readers developed their taste for fiction during the 90s. That was a generation that formed them. And in a way, it forced them to grow up. It forced them to evolve the media by kind of having a moment of clarity and seeing what it was becoming. It also has some really insightful commentary about modern comic books' relationship with their readers and how certain comic book fans and certain comic book readers have sort of made comic books too important, that they haven't properly assimilated them into their adult lives. And while yes, this only applies to an ever-shrinking sect of comic book fandom, it is still an interesting take on how we consume the medium. It's rare that you find a book that's able to be so dumb and silly and fun and still have something to say, so Oakhill Strike is a very unique series and it's definitely one worth checking out. That will do it for this week's poll. If you want to see a more comprehensive look at this week in comic books, make sure you head over to our movie pilot page. Make sure you check out my bullet reviews where I write one paragraph about most of the books that came out during the week. If you dug the show and you want to see more from me, Cody, and the rest of the Video Game Time Machine crew, make sure you're following me on Twitter and the channel on Facebook. Also, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. For every subscriber we get this week, I will take your mom on one date. I want to actually take some time to thank you guys so much for sharing this 12 to 15 minute time with me every single week. It's a lot of fun and I've really enjoyed getting to share my view on comic books with y'all, and I've really enjoyed getting to hear back from you. So make sure you guys are commenting below. I really love having these comic book conversations with you. I don't work or live in an environment where I run into a lot of comic book fans. Having the ability to talk with you guys about this thing that I'm so passionate about makes me really happy, and thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this outlet. It really means a lot to me. So get out of here and do that thing we love. Read comic books.